So to start with, what I've tried to do is just break it down into each type of sale, types of repairs that you're going to be likely to need to do, and also some ways to prevent that. So stickers and zeros are somewhat similar. Certain boats have more rigid sails. Ones that are more rigid, being carbon fibre sails, membrane, like you might look into with the next couple of slides of pencils and stuff. But the basic soft sails, looking at bleach tears, tears across the sail, and ring breakages, which is essentially, for some reason, most spinnakers end up using their rings. I think it's something to do with the long-term logging and chafe from up in the rig. Some people might have it a bit close to their fractional stay, which chafes and the webbing gets broken. So they're a pretty common scenario. The prevention being, obviously, like most things with halyards, not in general, can get into this, is just adjusting things so that you're not leaving the same way. Clear all your halyards away, so you're not going to risk a sail getting caught up in between a halyard, and just making sure that all the halyards are away from the boat sometimes helps. When you're short-handed, you've got not a lot of eyes to see what's going on. It helps just to clear everything out of the way and not risk getting tangled up. Once you've got everything up and it's safe, you move them back to the mast. You're doing maneuvers not going to be doing very frequent maneuvers. It's just going to be a one-off thing, and then probably for a few hours, you've got to just sort everything. And also cornering packages is just checking all the things before you put it up. Just make sure there's no corrosion or something that might be an issue. You might be able to just fix the sail before it goes up. It's easy enough to put a new ring in, and I'll show you how. But if it's gone up and the sail loses its ring while it's up there, it's a lot harder to fix the problem caused from that point of view. But yeah, just before you leave, check all your stuff, make sure there's no sharp spots on the rig, around your spreaders, your steering line, that kind of thing, and all your pull pit and everything. Just run your hand along, and if you get a cut, tape it up. Make sure everything's got tape all over it and whatnot. So yeah, pretty simple. I did bring in, there's no other slide for that, Spinnaker, is there? Kept it on one page. So what I have done is I've brought in a nice Spinnaker repair that we didn't bother doing for Martini Racing. So if we just go through some of the basic things that we've got to do these repairs, we'll just fix this tear for the first off. So if it's only a small tear, and I mean literally you can see that it's all the way through. If we've only managed to rip a small portion, sometimes a repair tape is more than enough. So the rule of yeah, you can all stand up and have a look. So the general rule of thumb with repairs is if it's small and the gap between the tape and the tear can be filled to the width of it, you can relatively use the repair tape. But when we're talking about that, I'm talking repair tape is something where you have a tear like that. You know, you've just got a little strip tear that you're able to just patch up, and it is relatively simple. We just cut the corners off the edge, so we just cut the length that we need, and just cut the corners off, just so that when it is on, it doesn't get peeled up. Helps if you've got another person, so I'll get Cyrus to turn on the other side of this. So if you just hold your hands on either side of the tear, and then I can put my palm down and then just stick that tape straight over the top. And you're just trying to go straight down the middle. And what I've done there is I've essentially made the length of that. The tear is essentially inside that tape. What I've tried to do is essentially have the same amount of distance around that whole tear. And that is how you know whether there's too much of a tear for the tape. If you can't essentially have the same amount of gap each side, it's just too big for that type of repair tape. If it is something that's simple and you're worried about it getting any bigger, I always suggest just doing it a bit. It's a bit agricultural, but sometimes just running some extra tape across just gives it that extra structure to stop it from shearing apart. And again, just doing it a little bit wider than the tape just reduces that risk of it actually tearing open. And something like that will actually just band-aid a lot better. Yeah, and then do exactly the same thing on the other side, at a minimum the same strip, and then do the tops if you're really worried about it. And I mean, if you've got enough tape, then go nuts. Look, I mean, that's covered in salt, and that's pretty stuck now. I'll just always give that a good rub down with my hands and just make sure that it's pressed down, but you can't really pick that up. I do just get a rag covered in salt. I'll try and just dust the salt off. The problem with spinnakers especially is they've absorbed most of the salt. So if you go get methylated spirits or acetone, you actually break down all the salt crystals and then it starts to go oily, and it's actually really hard to stick to. So and that leads me to the next scenario, is essentially if the repair tape isn't sticking, you just go bigger. So I'll just pop open, I'll just get a roll of the 250 or the 300, and it's good just having these cut lengths because it just means that you can literally grab a strip that you need and then leave the other bit in there and just go bigger. You know, you'll just cut a big patch. And this stuff's a high tack sticky. So the extra surface area means it's got more chance of sticking. And what this also allows you to do is just give it a really good rub down with heat, being your hand or a rag. But again, you want it to be dry, that's a given, but there's not much you can do about how much salt's in the sail. So we'll just stick that down and then use the waxed paper to give it a really good rub. And there is a guarantee that is probably not going to go anywhere. So that's if you run out of that, or that's not big enough, that's a really simple way to just get things back together. And it doesn't need to look pretty because you just need it to work. And in this case, it's covering enough area that it's going to stick really well. And then you're not relying on the tape to essentially stop the shear from happening. And having the more area of sticky you have, the better the shear or it will hold off shearing apart. If we get into the bigger repairs, you have an option to either use your repair tape, or I suggest just cutting small strips. And this is so that we can essentially put the repair back or the sail back together again before we do a major repair. So we'll just get some strips, just little baby strips, cut it straight off the roll. Essentially, we'll have Cyrus on the other side again. Anyone else is allowed to hold on to it. And what we'll do, because we've got the seams already where we know they're meant to be, is I like to just use the seam as a reference. So I'll just stick one right where the seam goes, again, just having a good amount of area either side. And that just means when we go back to actually trying to get the whole repair back together again, it'll just, normally the tear will be pretty relative.
Like, I just asked a question. When I did the back in 2013, we had a massive tear in our pipe.
Yep.
One thing we did provide was the pins shop, and we had a plywood board we kept on the boat.
Yeah, so if you have a sacrificial piece of wood.
Yeah, so for that, what we're doing there, you
didn't want to put it into the timber.
Okay. And
So
then get these pins off from the sail.
Yeah. So if you don't have someone to wake up,
holding your sail,
the whole thing down on the board. Like
correct. Yep.
couldn't find a good enough bit of wood.
Pretty much what
Essentially,
sail makers do when
if you've
they
had
make
it,
new
if you want to have a piece of wood that is about the size of a standard tear, and then you're just going to put pins either side of it. What this bit helps you do is essentially holds it in place so that you can then pin it out. That's so that's the next step. So in lieu of having someone to hold it, you want to have the pins in your board so that you can essentially pin it out. And I normally do it every seam if you can, if you've got enough pins. But you have to kind of do this first because otherwise you're trying to pin it out and you can't pin it out flat. So really basic way to get it together is to just get each individual bit like that. And then we'll even, again, just go down the middle of it and just fill those extra bits. And then because we've got it all pinned out, and I'm going to get you to be my pins again, we can then just cut a nice big strip off this and or use the width that we've got. And again, it doesn't need to be beautiful. Just cut the corners off so that we can essentially, it doesn't want to peel off, because if you do have any hard corners, it will just try to shear off. And just slap it on. Straight down the middle. It will, you can see how sticky it is. And if you don't rub it down, you've got a little bit of time to just get it right. But really basic. But you won't be able to do that easily if you don't put it all together in little bits first. So I'm going to leave that over there and someone can have a play with it. I'm going to put this sticky back over there. None of you have repaired a spinnaker before. It's nice and fun to have a go at that. But that's kind of the basics of how to repair a spinnaker of this type of tear. It doesn't matter if you do small strips overlap and just keep going around. So I would literally just keep going around that tear and just keep slapping on those small bits and just try to do it in smaller bits. In this case, this one's kind of gone all the way to the corner because I did cut it that way. When you get to the edge, if you're lucky enough that it lines up, you'll probably just wrap some sticky back around it and then do the other side again and wrap it around it and then just hand sew with a needle and thread just to get it all sewn together so it doesn't want to shear apart. But that sticky back is stronger than the nylon that it's made out of. So just put that over there. Actually, we're going to put that in. Does anyone have any questions about spinnaker repairs?
So how dry is dry?
If it's wet, go and get your hairdryer or hot gun if you have it on the boat, and just try to get that. It needs to be very dry. It's going to be one of those. So I think that's where like the high-tech sticky back is going to be much more reliable, because realistically this stuff's sticky and it does do well for small repairs. But you can, as I said, the hard thing is if the salt's in the sail, it's going to melt and it's going to kind of create like a really oily surface. If you're lucky and it's not too, you can try it. It's not going to completely stop it from working, but it'll just mean you have to give more dry time. So you might try and just dry it off with acetone. Like acetone's a great product to actually dry things out at the same time. So it just depends on how much salt's in there. If it's just covered in salt and super wet, then you're just going to have to let it dry and get a hairdryer and actually get it to almost crispy.
Yeah, right.
Because otherwise it's just not going to stick. So yeah, how you do that, you're going to have to just go and put some towels on it and then hang the towels outside and then put some more towels on it, or what you're actually going to have to do. But that's why I do use more of this, because you can just keep slapping more on, and it does seem to stick a bit better in the, like if it's slightly damp, it will still work. Whereas that, repair tapes, and especially ones you buy from the channel, they won't stick at all. But if in doubt, just hand sew it. If you have to, it is what it is, right? Like you might be in a situation where you just need that sail back up, and then just give it an assessment. If you can see it pulling on the repair, then you're just going to have to let it dry a bit more and put more sticky back on. But I've seen some pretty horrible repairs where they've just kept putting more and more on because you just got to try anything, and it doesn't need to look pretty. So, Code Zeros are going to have. It's very rare to have a hole in your Code Zero. I think the only type of hole is one where it gets some fractures in the leach, and if that's the case, then you're probably just using stuff like this to then wrap around the leach tape and just sewing, sticking it back to back. Trick's just trying to build as much reinforcing in by just putting more and more of this stuff on the side of it. There is other things we'll talk about, but I'm going to just use the other element of this to show you how to repair a head saw. So. Get on to the next one. I realised after I put this that none of you probably have luff tapes apart from a few furling boats, so it is helpful. Luff tape tear is pretty common. People obviously sailing for a long period of time with the sail in position, you don't have quite enough heavy tension, you can get a fair bit of fraying on the top section of your luff tape. Leach and foot tape tears, well, that's just probably, you caught it on your spreader or it's flogged it a little bit too much and separated from the leach. Batten pockets, probably from getting a wrap or again, just flogging. Batten breakages are a little bit hard to fix, but what I'd probably suggest is that we just find, 2 or 3 battens that fit every sail, every jib you've got. So if you've got multiple head sails, you want to make sure that you've got at least 2 or 3 battens that are the maximum length you're ever going to need, and just be able to cut them down to whatever size you need. and obviously as long as it can be. You're not going to have a lot of storage space, so you just want to, the jibs you just do is you just work that out and you'll be able to have the right ones. And then we've just got everything lined up over here as far as what we're going to do to fix it. I've got a few repairs that I've done before I came here. Major repairs are going to be, you're going to have to glue something back on. So you've had a big enough tear that any bit of sticky back isn't going to be enough. So what I've got here is essentially a marine grade adhesive. In this case, it's liquid nails. There is a better product, but I've been trying to source it locally. It's a 3M product that's called 5200, and again, it's a marine adhesive. But essentially, we want to try and find something that's got a fair bit of shear strength and the ability to bond it and let it set. The problem with this type of repair is it's going to take a day. So I've glued these and I'll pass them around. You can feel they're quite tacked already. That was an hour ago, and this was 2 hours ago. This is a film. Obviously, this is a film, and that one's a taffeta. The film, funnily enough, has probably taken a little longer to tack off. But you can actually see if you try to peel it, the film is still tacking. So the curing time being a day is literally, if you've got a massive tear in your sail, you're just going to have to put it somewhere to dry. In this case, this stuff works really well with moisture, so we're just going to let it set. I'm going to give it a go to show you guys how to actually fix it. But we've got a nice tear in our mainsail, or headsail in this case. So again, what we're trying to do is just create enough structure outside of it. The general rule of thumb is kind of 1 millimetre per foot for how much glue we want to get in the sail. So that's the minimum. So if we're going to glue something together and you've got a 50 footer, you need 50 millimetres of glue either side of that tear, and you will have just enough shear strength to stop it from actually breaking again. So what we want to do is just have seam stick either side of, or double-sided tape either side of your hole. And this is just to obviously stick something either side of it. And then we're going to add glue around that perimeter. If the hole is really hard to work with, we might do something like we did with the spinnaker, where we just patch each individual bit up, but this is a pretty clean cut, so we're able to work with it pretty easily. There was a pretty big hole there, and I was still able to, with a flat surface, be able to just stick it down. So we're just going to run some double-sided tape around the whole perimeter of that tear just to lock it in. If it was all the way to the leach, we obviously need to kind of try and do a wrap around or something where it get glue all the way around the sail. And in that case, you'd be using that to then fold around, and then we'll just get some sticky back and sew it down. So as I said, you probably just want like 1 metre of cloth that you can just cut up, or more than 1 metre in some cases, just to be able to cut up and repair. This is only really going to happen, I think it's more common on kind of radial sails and stuff like that. If you reef for a really long time, we've found that a lot of boats kind of had shear or separation in the cloth because it didn't quite have enough fibre or whatnot. So funnily enough, this is quite a common kind of tear in a long race for anything kind of radial orientation material. So we'll just kind of work to what we're repairing. In this case, it's pretty flat, and you can use your pins or someone to hold it down. But if they're asleep, we'll just get that bit of wood out, and we'll just try and patch up the hole. If it's bigger, well, good luck. You will need someone to hold it down while you do it. It's all so much easier in here. So we've just got that double-sided tape has essentially allowed us to have a bead of glue all the way around. And that's going to lock it all in. The double-sided tape will hold it in place where it needs to. Gloves, very important. And we want to keep this as clean as possible on the boat. It's going to be very hard.
To shake the table for you to send.
So for the sake of keeping the boat clean, we're going to put masking tape all the way around the repair, and you can use more. But this is just meaning that when you do see why, that essentially we're going to try and squeeze that glue out of this whole seam. So, and we are really just rebuilding the area that is broken. I like to put a little bit there because then I can put weights or whatnot on the sail, and probably something that I'm looking into is just whether or not it's necessary with these products. But sometimes you might put a heavy weight or something of that nature just to kind of lock it in. I think some of you might have. It depends on the product. This kind of product, I think we just rely on the glue to kind of set and again just cure for that day. But there's some product ranges that you might actually get your sailmaker might have a proper repair glue for it. And those that have it will know.
You have things like Sikaflex already on the boat. Would that be okay?
Yeah, so I think even this I'm kind of testing. There's a certain grade that the glue needs to be able to work to under pressure. Sikaflex is not quite there. So I think it's it's 4 MBS or something, I think it is called. But essentially you want it to be around that, and Sikaflex is like 1. So it's not quite strong enough. I know plenty of people that have used Sikaflex. Dacron sails seem to be fine with Sikaflex, and I've seen it. And again, like if you're worried about whether or not it's strong enough, just add more. Like if you have a massive patch of glue that big, I don't think you're going to have too much trouble. But as I said, minimum would be 1 millimetre for every foot of your boat length. So
the glue, is that like how stretchy the glue is kind of thing?
You can feel that one.
Just, you don't want to touch the bit there. Essentially, are you talking about how stretchy it is actually now, or
Yeah,
is that
once
why?
it dries, do you mean?
Yeah,
Like crystal?
So it's like it's essentially the shear value of it. So essentially, if you just tried to shear it apart, it can work under a certain amount of shear load. And it is way above my pay grade.
Yeah,
exactly why.
that,
I've spoken to about 3 chemists this week just to work out exactly what the right glues are because I couldn't get the one I wanted. So there is a little bit of
urethane, need some waterproofing.
yeah. So this stuff kind of works as it tacks off in moisture. So you can even spray it a little bit and it'll actually tack off quicker. So it's good for what you guys are going to do.
Yeah.
If we use something else, you could put it up and it'll last 5 seconds because of the heat and the moisture and everything in the air. It just won't tack off properly or it'll go back to nothing.
Yeah.
So there's some glues that will actually wear out from that extra heat and moisture. So this one kind of just ticks all the boxes, but we're still on a work in progress on trying to find something that doesn't cost $70 a tube versus this is only $12 a tube or something. So we're just trying to find a more cost-effective product. This has all the values of the one that we've been suggested, which is a 3M product, 5200. And again, it's a marine sealant. It's just more expensive, but everything in this liquid nails actually meets that criteria. So I'll let you all know how it sets and whether or not it is something we can use. Otherwise, my suggestion is the 3M 5200, which I think there's only about 2 suppliers. So I'm probably going to find some after I've suggested it, but it's $70 a tube. Yeah. Now for the fun part. You've all probably used stuff like this, so it's no biggie to actually squeeze in. I've actually just been going nuts with it because I'm worried that it won't get enough glue out when I do it. So I just kind of squiggle it along. Helps to have pins in. That part's important. Stuff goes everywhere. It's not going to tack off. Like we can do all of it if we wanted to, but I'm just going to show you this bit and then let someone else have a go. But essentially what you're trying to do is squeegee it all out. So I've just got a paint scraper and then I'm just going to press on and actually squeeze that glue out, getting it pressing quite hard and making sure that it's going down nice and flat. And you can see why I put the masking tape down. It just means that it keeps everything clean. Let it tack off before you take the masking tape off. So I'll give you that advice. It's a very messy process trying to work that out. So it's really basic. Again, just making it wider and wider depending on the size of the boat. If we set it like that, within about 10 minutes, you can move it around. Like it's not going to need to be sitting there and with all the masking tape on it. And then we just need to leave it somewhere, and it doesn't actually matter if it's wet in that area. So if it's in a damp part of the boat or anything like that, it's actually not that bad. It'll aerate and go a bit milky, and that's the whole point. You want to try and get the chemical reaction working. So what we don't want to do is cover it with anything else. So we want to make sure there's enough glue in there that it doesn't need sticky back on top. It doesn't need anything else, because we don't want to trap the glue inside. So what I thought was a good idea was like, oh, we'll just fix this and then we'll put something on top. But if you do that, it's kind of breaks down all those glues again. So we just got to leave it as it is and just back it in and then give it a day. And then again, once you get it back up, make sure it's not moving, because then you've got to go to plan B, which is just even more sticky back. Yeah, so if anyone wants to try it, you want to put some gloves on. Nah, you don't have to. Don't feel the pressure.
I'll give it a whirl.
Yeah?
Yeah, why not?
All good.
Bit of fun.
So yeah, I think I've been told that it is good to just put some weights on it, but from how that's tacked off, I don't think it's necessary. And I don't think you're going to be able to find stuff to actually.
Use clamps.
Yeah, clamps and a board.
Yeah.
Yeah, just get 2 bits of wood and clamp it down. But you'll probably want to clear off your masking tape. So I'd probably give it 5-10 minutes, clear the masking tape off, and then go and put it somewhere and get it under compression, and it'll probably have more chance of bonding. It just depends on how big the repair is and what you're actually trying to stick together.
Liquid nails.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh, I'm right-handed, so then you can move around.
that's fine.
Turn the world around.
You have to get a bead like right in the crack kind of thing.
Yeah, well,
There we go.
if you're further in, it won't matter, because essentially you're going to be able to squeeze it all out. And you'd be surprised how little you need to actually get out. But if in doubt, just keep filling it, because what you don't want to do is have to go back again. That's it. But I think what I found was really good is that you do just have time to put things away and not have everything, trying to have everything on the go. Yeah, there you go. Told you it was messy. So just do, if you do it in one nice smooth push, it'll just squeegee it all out all at once.
So like you're thinking
Last
about
time you ran others, do you recommend?
Oh yeah, lots of glue.
others on this as well?
It's not really necessary.
Put it everywhere.
High five, anyone? if you rounded the corners off in this case, it might just minimise the risk of it actually shearing off. So, I mean, if in doubt, you can, it's fine. It's just heaps. It's a little bit easier to just leave it on top. It's fine. Yeah, if it just stops the shear. But I mean, you can, like the bit that I was passing around, it's incredible how well it actually tacks off right in the corners. So if you have any major repairs and that works for your mainsail, you've got a rigid code 0 or anything like that, you might have to work to that scenario. I don't. It's fine. Hey.
Clever.
All right. Again, both sides. No.
That'd be fun.
In most cases, you just leave it. I might just put some sticky back on the other side.
Okay.
If it's like that long, then yeah, you're probably going to have to start putting some bits on the other side.
So is this all in the kit,
That's all in the kit.
in that kit?
Yeah, so you'd have your glue, you'd have a roll of cloth somewhere that you can store in a reasonably dry place, but again, it'll work slightly wet or moist. Yeah, I guess you kind of need something of that nature for any major repairs, because there's not much you can do. And again, yes, it's a day, but I think anything that needs that kind of repair, it's going to be important enough to give it some time.
Especially given that we're
probably only going to have, well, most of us have got furling head saws and bits and pieces. You only have one or two. You know,
Yeah.
You don't have multiple.
Yeah. So I believe that'll work for 3DI as well, if we go into that, the 5200 range. But if any of you have 3DI sales, I think they have to use a slightly different glue for that to set. Speak to Aaron at North, he'll be able to give you what they use. But I would say if you have any other sales other than that, this stuff or the 5200 is a preference because it just has slightly different properties. If you used the other product that they use on, I think it's a Loctite product, it just doesn't have the same properties for the moist air and everything like that. So it worked perfectly good for their product, but unfortunately it probably won't work for the other stuff. So you want something, either that or the more expensive model. Cool. Any questions? Okay. Try not to be too long. No, it's amazing. That's my head tools again. What did we just say? Do we not have head tools?
You didn't go to prevention.
Oh, prevention. Okay,
They're on the sheet.
they're on the sheet. Let's go on the main tools. Same problems again, luff tape tear. I think like the basics to actually fixing a luff tape, and I don't actually have a bolt rope here, but it's really just a case of just getting some sticky back, wrapping it around what is torn, and then just acting like a sewing machine and just trying to get that bolt rope back to a straight stitch. And just, I think most of you probably have done something similar to that.
Well, yeah, I think most are supposed to have cars. anyway.
Most of them have,
Most of them
hang. So I think, Cyrus, you've got a furler, so, and so do you. So you'll need, if you did rip the head of your luff tape or something of that nature, you've got two options. You get a hot knife. That's a really cool portable hot knife that wasn't available a few years ago. You might just cut it off. You know, if it's only that much at the top, you'll just chop it straight off. It's easier to fix that way. Normally you can have, you know, a good half a metre on a furler before that's going to be an issue, cutting it off. Otherwise, yeah, you just wrap some sticky back around it and hand sew and just try and replicate what is the straight stitch or the stitching on the tape. But yeah, most of you will have luff cars or slides. And then it's really just a case of hopefully the sale that you do have has eyelets where those slides are so that you're able to actually just freehand sew whatever webbing fixture was there before. I've cut it off to show you something else, but essentially just have a roll of some webbing so that you can always just cut some off with a hot knife and just hand sew whatever you need to. Again, if the batten pocket tear, you're going to have to do something of that nature, or you just use lots of sticky back. And the batten, there is only going to be one batten. If you've got really long battens, you're just going to need that really long batten as a backup. And some of the guys put it in their boom, so that you had somewhere to stow it. That's about the only place that you're going to be able to store a batten of that size. But yeah, just get as long a batten as you can. Otherwise, there's some options of spliced batten kits, which you can get, which means that you can essentially have some spare battens that we can splice together so that we can make a full-length batten. It's a pretty rare thing to have happen on a full-length batten, but just in case. And again, just basics of cornering breakages and wear and spreader patches. So we've just got our kit that we need. If there is any wear marks, don't let it get too long before you can go up there and actually do it up the mast if you really want to, but otherwise just pull the sail down and fix it. Don't let the wear tear or the wear turn into a tear. And you know, all you had to do is pull the main down for 5 minutes and fix it. So just be aware of it.
From a safety point of view, you might be running for days.
Yeah.
For example, your standard mainsail has one spreader patch on your right.
Yep.
So do you think it's worth putting extras on to avoid this chafing?
You want to make sure there's a couple of layers. You know,
Yeah,
so we would suggest having
yeah,
like a layer of Dacron and then a layer of sticky back over the top.
That's right.
Just-
Just buy some sticky back from your sail maker, I guess.
Yeah,
Just
just add
put
another
it out
layer
on
on.
a lawn or wherever,
Yeah.
and just put extra spreader patches on.
Yeah,
As a tip.
it's not going to hurt. But yeah, you want to have at least a layer of Dacron and a sticky back or a Kevlar patch that's going to pretty much do the work of those two together. But we'll get into the prevention of it, but essentially, as
Make
far
sure
as,
your second reef's done.
yeah, make sure all your reefs are done.
All your reef
Um,
points
It's
are.
about the only time where you're gonna have it that
Yeah.
far out, because we're easing our sails a bit more as short-handed sailors, you need to essentially, you're gonna have that sail touching the rig a lot more than a race boat.
Or third rig.
Fully crewed boat or even third rig. But like, you just manage the vang tension and just trying to control how much leach is hanging on the rig, and as much as you can, just try and keep the main away from the rig where possible. Don't do, I have said that before, and people have pulled a lot of vang on and then broken their vang from having so much on because they were so worried about it. But you can see when the sail's really hanging over the rig, and you don't necessarily need that all the time. So just be aware that the sail, does need to be looked after, and just make sure you're not doing anything too harsh to it just because it feels like a little bit too much wind or whatnot. You just got to manage how much you can have on, and maybe there's some other things you can do around the boat to depower the boat rather than have it hang on the rig the whole time. But yeah, if you haven't inspected everything on the boat, then like your luff cars and everything like that, you've got to give them a good, make sure they've all got Loctite on them, blue Loctite, not red. Make sure that they're all locked in position. The vibrations on these boats are for real. When you're reaching and the luff is fluttering, I've had all sorts of pins fall out, cars fall out. So every nut and bolt is attaching your sail to the mast needs to be looked at before you do fit it to the boat. And then once it's on there, just make sure that there's nothing else going on that will stop it from going up and down. Any sharp spots in the track that'll impact your luff tape and your cars if it's going to happen. So rig inspection is important. So while you're doing it, make sure all the things for the sails are also not going to cause any damage.
Those are slopes on Selden Mass were A014.
AO14, yeah.
Those things.
Yeah.
They've been on the sale for a couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got to remember that they're plastic, right? So most of you will have boom covers or something of that nature. If you don't have 100% blockout, anything plastic on the sail is probably more worn out. So yeah, most of those plastic slugs especially, they do get quite easily damaged and they become very brittle. They're only very small. So yeah, easy things like that with $5 a slide or whatever it is, go and put all new ones on. But I would imagine that most of you have RCD systems or something of that nature that affect some new cars, good. Some new spare cars. You definitely like even the. I found some of like the Ratchison ones where they've got the wheel cars. A lot of people have the wheel cars. Just having the one that's webbed on, because if your intermediate slide broke off, you could just screw a new fitting on. The ball slides from one stand are the same. But yeah, you should at least have one or two back cars or intermediate cars, because all you need is a situation when it comes to hoisting and dropping where you put a little bit too much alcohol on before the sail got all the way up, and you can break 2 or 3 slides in one hit. So make sure whatever you've got on the boat, you have a few of, or an option if you broke it to fix, whether it's exactly the same product or not. So I guess what I mean by that is, if you've got a webbed on car that is suitable for your battens, that doesn't mean you can't use it for intermediates. So whatever's the best option, if it's a wrong stand system, you've got high-low and intermediate cars, well, the high-low car is the best one to have on the boat, because it doesn't matter which one you break, you can replace it. So yeah, just looking at the system you've got there, and it is all there, reducing the amount of vang, using as much vang as you can to reduce the rig chafe, prevent a boom break. I don't know, are you going to get into that at all, or yeah? I don't know whether that's actually been touched on by anyone, but essentially, I think all of you are going to have some form of boom break. What you don't want is your boom break to break your boom. So booms aren't that strong if you go and just start tying things in random places. So what a lot of the boats are now trying to do is actually structure a boom break that essentially continues along the boom. So we're actually using something that's fitted from the outhole to the gooseneck fitting, and then something that's actually running forwards to the bow or something of that nature, and then back onto the winch. And I know that sounds a bit backwards, but we're not actually trying to stop the boom from going all the way. We just need to reduce the rate in which it does it. So tying the boom off and fixing it down to leeward stops it from going anywhere, but it can risk breaking it. So definitely look into the best ways to do that. Have you got one, Pete?
Which is now.
Yeah, they've got
parent company,
they've got one that's got a slow.
boom breakdown.
Yeah. So there's a couple of companies that have that where they've got and it's a slow process rather than something that stops it from going. So that at a minimum. And if you've got carbon booms, I think then you start to look into what I'm talking about there, was essentially some of the way to actually reduce that boom from going out. That is totally off subject, but important.
Right.
And the only other thing that I've got to kind of play with is a corner breakdown. So now that we've done all our gluing, I wanted to just look at how we'd actually fix a ring. So if the ring came off from shape or whatnot, we want to be able to weave a ring back on. So we've got a roll of webbing, essentially, that I've just cut down into individual bits that are the same, if not a little bit shorter in this case, as the webbing that was on there. So we're just trying to replicate what was there. In this case, something got caught and it ripped it all off. An easy way to get, what I like to do is probably get the webbing off. The webbing that's broken is not important anymore. So what we can do is, in a really simple way, we just, to break all the stitching off, we just cut down with a Stanley knife. We actually cut through all the stitching, and most of you will have zigzagged webbing anyway, so this will work really well. So just get a nice sharp Stanley knife, and that just cuts up all of the stitching that's holding it on there. And then I just get a pair of pliers. And the only reason I'm doing this, I mean, technically you could probably hand sew through all of this, but we're trying to make life a little bit easier for ourselves, and you're all bored out of your brains looking at sales all day, so we may as well have some fun fixing them.
Give them the secrets away.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. You can all do it yourself now. So that just makes it so much easier to take the webbings off, right? You're not sitting there with an unpicker trying to get each individual bit out. And the only reason I'm doing this is because I actually don't have another ring. But what getting rid of it, it just makes it so much easier to hand sew on. Once you've got that, you want to put that new webbing on. So there's two ways that we can fix this. We can either try and fix it by actually replacing everything, or we can actually just bolt on an old one. So one of the repairs that I saw someone did, I think it was either the last time round or it was actually just, when Paulie Nielsen did it on one of the boats to Vanuatu or something, and he was so proud of it. But he essentially got an old clue. So he had like two spinnakers that weren't working anymore. So it was like desperate times, desperate measures. And what he did was he actually just put the old clue straight on, and he actually just got some bolts. So he's just got like basic nuts and bolts. I think I put one in here just like it was literally like some washers. Got a drill, drilled through all the webbings, got everything lined up, and just put like 5 or 6 bolts all the way down. It was pretty cool, liked it, and it worked. So, I guess the what we know about sales now is, you know, we do all these massive webbings, but the reality is that most of the structure in the sail, most of the structure in the webbing is actually, or the strength is coming from the first kind of 2 or 3 inches. So the important bit's really just hand sewing where the ring is and making sure that bit's down, but also that's providing the most amount of strength. So what we want to do is essentially replicate, that is a mess. We want to replicate that hand sewing, but we'll go further. So we'll actually stitch another row there, and another row there, and even another row. And that stitching there is going to provide all the strength in that webbing. From there, you can kind of just dive in and out. So we'll just be able to have our whatever webbings we've cut. Put one in the middle just to hold it down for you. And just pull it tight. Now, if you've got your little bit of wood, you can just make sure they're all back to back. So we'll get a push pin or one of those awls, and we'll just push our pin through and just make sure that's lined up.
That's just a little trick to make sure when you sew it all together that you're not having to do multiple rows. So again, all you need to do now is hand sew it. And if you don't have time, you want to get the sail back up again, I suggest just getting some nuts and bolts and just chucking them in there, because it will work just fine. So now that we've put our webbings on, I'm not going to go all the way through. As I explained, we really just want to try and get as many rows through the sail of hand stitching. You'll have a block of wood or something of that nature, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do this on the bench. So what we've got a spike or an awl and a hammer. And what we want to do is just punch a big enough hole through here that we're not having to fight to push it through. We don't want to use the palm, essentially, to push the hole in. So I'm just going to bang this hole in over here. And none of you can see it, but it makes sense. I can't do it on the table. So I've just punched that all the way through, and I'll even go as far as to just push it right in. And that'll just make the hole that much bigger. So when I do go to hand sew, I'll be able to actually get my needle through. Get lots. So you want to have your 2 passes through the needle. And normally you'll have pre-waxed thread, so it'll just kind of hold together for you. Scissors over there. There you go. Thank you. Great. And you just want to do a little knot in it, and that just stops it from pulling through when you go through your first hole. And because we've put a really nice big hole in, all I got to do is pretty much poke it through with my fingers. I don't even need my palm. So the first little stitch, we would just want to lock off everything. So we put a knot through, and then we just run it back over again, and that just stops that first knot from pulling through, and just pulling firm on that first one so that nothing pulls through. And then we'll just go hole after hole, and we'll just have a nice evenly spaced set of holes. I'm going to do this because I know I can. Can't bang it through. Even though. So the old sail webbing in it.
Yeah, so your suturing from last week, we're gonna do.
You've all done a bit of suturing, haven't you? Yeah. I guess the main trick is making sure that you can actually do things without having to push that needle through with your palm. And the bigger the hole, the easier that is. So we'll just dive in, and I'll just do this little bit so you can see it. So we'll just dive in and out. Then for strength, we want a minimum. So for strength, we want to go over and back at a minimum. I always do 2 passes on the first row, and then the next rows are just kind of one back and forth, or forwards and backwards. Yep. So we just, when we go, and then we just run back through, so that we're locking off what's there. And it's good just to have a pair of pliers just to be able to get it through. So as far as spacing is concerned, that's kind of your minimum spacing, or like the longest you want to be, sorry. So I try to do it maybe 10 millimeters apart, especially on the first 2 rows, and then you might just start to spread it out. Once you've done all of the rows around it, then we can kind of go into a more a longer stitch. That's essentially just holding the webbing down. So we'll just spike holes every 10 millimeters all the way to the end, and then go up and back. And then you're kind of recreating that stitch into that, or a straight stitch into that. And that'll give you enough strength. So yeah, that's pretty simple. I think most of you would be able to accomplish that. But you can see how important it is to just have a good palm to actually work to, and just a pair of pliers that you can actually pull the needle through. But really, for you guys, just bang as big a hole as you can in it, so you're not having to fight it. On that, just replicating whatever's there.
if in doubt, just same length, same everything, and then the more rows you do here means the less you have to do down the end. So, yeah, I think that's kind of as basic as it gets. Is there any questions?
Is that sticky webbing, is that as strong as the initial original one, I guess?
I would suggest having your heavy duty webbing in there. So that's a tube webbing.
Yeah.
That's kind of your minimum. If you've got a bigger boat, we might put like spectral webbing as well on the boat, because that'll just be a little bit stronger. Kind of that and minimum high load webbing.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of fixing it with hand sewing thread and stuff like that. The good thing about the Spectra is it's actually quite a lot easier to get your palm through and work with, whereas the tube webbings are a lot more rigid. So, yeah, depending on how big your boat is, you might choose to just have a whole roll of 1-inch Spectra webbing or something of that nature, but you really want to replicate whatever the boat has at a minimum. Yeah, now I've made that mess. I think that's it, isn't it?
It is, those
Sure.
are slide. So, like, anybody that wants to get kits or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm going to build that kit list so that it includes that that product that I was talking about as an option. But I'll Delma has the list. But what I would say is I would probably just have a chat with whoever about the boat you have and what sales you've got and what sort of sales we're going to try and fix to what we do to that list.
One option for your kit as well is to, instead of having a rigid plastic one, which they can break in the boat when they move around and slam around, is get a flexible one made up Velcro lid, so that's more robust than. I wouldn't take one of those boxes.
If you've got somewhere safe to put it, it's one thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think the times where I have done it, it's been somewhere to do it, but
Fishing boats, that material.
yeah, just yeah.
With a, and.
I think we did one for you where it was just like a flat piece of
fantastic.
vinyl and a Velcro.
Yeah, fantastic.
If you're finishing off a knot, just tie knots, lots and lots.
So, Blake, do you want me to put this kit up for them to have a look at?
Yeah, but yeah, they're welcome to. Again, as I said, it's probably specific to each boat.
Yeah.
Of exactly what you want to have and how much you actually just burn that off. Clean.
So, everyone, I'll put that spreadsheet that Blake's put up, I'll put it against the session tonight. Up here is an idea if you want to go to it.
I just tried to do as much as I could to show you how to do these repairs, but I think the key is to just remember that you can be rough. It just needs to make sure that it's got lots of sticky dash and won't come apart again.
Oh, that was excellent. Thanks, man.
All good.
I've made such a good mess. Well, you did pretty well. That was just on the hour, so wasn't it? Yeah. Well done. So I'll give you a hand for that.
Stay married. Try and get out of the way.
Blake, thank you very much.
All good. All right, for having me. Janet. Both Blake and Janet. Blake has been a long time supporter of the Melbourne Osaka race. He does most of this training you guys have seen in previous races. So big thank you for Blake again for coming out. You're located down here. And Janet is also a sponsor of the Osaka race. And as I said before, we'll welcome you guys in and look after your needs. Yep.
So your best bet, if you're going is to prepare, and check, and recheck before you start this. And have a checklist for your boat or every day to check all your little ones. I was watching the I was watching the Monday Globe and a lot of the guys, oh, I just completed my daily check. They literally go around each turn-hole, each piece of rigging, they check no things are broken. Their pins are still in place, they're not chafing each rope. They're checking all of those things like every shift. So, and then they have to do that or you saw Piper's mast broke, several of the riggings broke during the race and stuff. Now, I'm no expert on masts breaking, but I know there's a few of you in here that have had masts all over. So there's different things that happen that allow that to happen, you know. First thing is everything has a breaking load and a breaking point. So you may find you're in just high winds and it's broken. And there are some times where there's a mast that broke over last year, and it was one of the screws had literally come to its very edge of its thread, and it broke or it pulled off, and the mast fell over. And that was the end. It's just because those checks weren't happening on a regular basis. They were wins racers, but that's what happened. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, you go to some potential problems. I actually had some notes on these, unfortunately. I'm not going to be able to see them because I don't have my own little screen. But if you just go back to the first one there. The potential problems are endless. I didn't do a check and things came apart. I have a breaking load and on my stud, one of the wires came loose and my rigging is weaker. It could be I had a chafe point and the halyard's broken off. It could be even more catastrophic. The screws came loose on the rudder and there goes, you know, or there's endless amounts of problems you're going to find to see. So your best bet always is get everything inspected before you go. Check everything before you leave dock, and every day you're checking and checking and checking. So you've got endless amounts of things that can go on. So checking and looking at your boat every day, all the time, is your most important thing to do. And having the tools and all the components to fix it. And that's something I've brought here to show you is some of the things you can have on your boat to fix it. But every boat's a little bit different. So on White Spirit, you have wire rigging, but I think Jazz Player is partly Dyneema rigging and partly wire rigging. And then you've got, I know, do we have an X boat going, an X yacht going? I could have sworn I saw an X yacht. But then you have rod rigging, right? Zero. I was out there looking at it today. And so they would have rod rigging, so they have completely different checks that they're going to be doing than somebody who has wire rigging or Dyneema rigging. So the tools that you need are different for each boat. Now I've gone through the list that Cyrus you sent it to me, that components of the things that you need to have on the boat, or I don't know if it's required or suggested that you have on the boat. So that'll be the next screen that I should have a little bit nervous. But it's like tools. The tools. So these are the things that on the suggested list. These are the things that Cat 1 requirements that say you have, and a few things that I'm going to recommend are things like wire effects. I know it seems like a very simple thing, but this can get you out of a lot of trouble. If you've got a single wire broken on one piece of rigging, you know, to reinforce, you can use a couple of these to put a ball and put another piece with it or a piece of Dyneema with it to strengthen it. It's as simple as that. It's not very complicated. The thing that I'm thinking about suggesting, but is a little bit different, is stay-lock fitting. So they come in things like bubbles, and they do come in eyes, so like that, and they come in. And you can put these on any fitting here, like on the wire and connect one bit of wire, and a bit of wire. So if you were to have, say, I think I'm kind of going out of order here, but one strand break. So you're offshore, one of your loads is broken. The wire's just snapped, right? So you would go on the bottom piece, you could do one of these. On the top piece, you can do one of these, and in between, you would be a bit done. And what these stay-on fittings do, I brought these here so you can actually put them together if you want to try it. Because they're not the simplest things to use, but they're meant for offshore so that you can repair your rigging on your own offshore wire. So you're not going up the mast and replacing a piece of wire with, because I think that's the suggestion with having a load of robot. But these are, so I think I'm going to wait to show this demonstration at the same time. That's all right. You can do the next one. So your first ensure, the other thing with your first ensure is to make sure you have a bag that you can take out with your tools and all the things you need, and a helmet, because when you're offshore, it can be quite hectic. And if you're breaking wire, you're probably not in the best situation anyway. You go to the next one. So one of the things I want to talk about is the worst case scenario. And like I said, there's been a couple of people in here I've talked to, and I've never been in the situation where you dismissed, but there are a lot of people that have. And I actually fixed quite a few that have dismissed it and put the mess back together. But the reasons, these are some of the reasons you might have a disnesting. But one of the things that we're going to talk about today is disnesting because you're rigging is and again, the best way to prevent it is to do your checks on a regular basis. And I would suggest that you go up the mast every once in a while to check your rigging while you're out at sea. Has anybody gone up the mast? How many people have gone up your mast? That's great. And for those of you who haven't, is there a reason?
It's scary.
I do it every day. So like, I'm like, woohoo, let's go up again. But the other thing is have you gone up with the partner you're sailing? Because that's the other thing to talk about before you all go out. Do you have the equipment to send someone up the mast? How many people have electric winches? Raise your hands up. So there's not that many. So if you're going up the mast, you got to send it up the mast. How are you getting them up the mast? Because it is hard work to take someone up the mast with a winch like this. So is that something that, again, you feel safe with, and how it works with you? You know, do you have safety protocol? You go up on one time, you have safety. So having those type of things, it's just like doing a man overboard, making sure you have a protocol for that for your team when you go up the mast. If you have to go up the mast because he's injured, how does that go? Do you know what I mean? Those are the kind of things that you should be thinking about now, before you get out there and have something like this happen. So if you do have a dismasting, there's your first thing is safety. Is your safety always first thing? Because there's two ways to look at this. Are you going to and ship it because it's that unsafe? Do you have a big hole in your boat and it's going to sink? Or can you move it to your recovery stage? And I hope you already have your protocol for thinking about it. So you would already have talked about that or have a protocol in place. So if we go on to recovery, these are the things we're going to look at as well. So there's different tools that you can have, and I want y'all to come up and actually try and use some of these tools. We may have to go outside to use the angle grinder because it does spray sparks. And I did bring safety gear if you want to use the angle grinder and have a play. I would suggest that you do that because if you haven't done it for it, now is the time to feel it, touch it, do it. if you have one of these on your boat, I want you to use these as well. Because I want you to see how hard it is, because most of you have pretty big boats. And this is 12 mil. And how hard it is to cut that. I know I can't. And I'm pretty strong. I mean, I'm a rigger. And I'm pretty strong and I can't cut. With these, I can cut up to 8 mil, and that's about as far as I can go. So if you have these on your boat and that's all you have to cut your rigging off, maybe think of another option. So how many people have these on their boat? How many people have these on their Wednesday boat? Anybody sail on Wednesdays? Your racing? Thursdays, okay, sorry. I use Wednesdays as a, like a little, you know, there you go. So you have these on your boat, and so my story is, the boat that I sail, well, you do. They just masted last year, and this is what they had on the boat. Now, they only partially dismasted because the top half fell off, but they still had the wire away because it was gonna cause it if they didn't. But they tried to use this to get it off, and it was all like, with this rigging, it is pretty impossible to use these to have to. And these are pretty sharp ones, to be honest, because they kind of on the shit. But if you, how many people have the angle? Yeah. So the wire is really great. Make sure you have a new blade. I don't have a new blade on it. But even doing that, cutting loose rigging is very difficult. So you need to, I want you to, we'll take it outside and do it, because I've got goggles and everything for anyone who wants to do it. But it's actually more difficult than you think. When you're cutting loose water, you actually have to hold it pretty close to where you're cutting, or it will go back and forth and do this, and you won't cut. So you have to cut it pretty close to where you're holding. So if you're doing that and doing this on the, it's pretty hard to still use this. So again, think about that a little bit along the way. The other one I have, and this is my favorite tool, and I can use it now because it doesn't throw sponge or do anything weird. It's a rebar. It is used in the shed because, but it is. It's pretty hefty, right? It's not like, you know, this is hefty, but that's hefty, right? But if I've got to cut through rigging, I sent. So think about what you might need to have on the boat when the worst thing happens and what's going to be the easiest thing to do. Because the other thing that has come up is I watched the Lisa Blair movie here at Sandy, which was really great. And Lisa Blair was here to talk about it, which was really cool. But she had to go forward because your forestay has a furler on it and pop out the pin. And she hammered at it for what she felt like was a very, very long time. It was probably about this long time when you're freezing. Although y'all are going up north, so you may not be freezing. But when you're in the waves and you're wet and you're slick and you're trying to do something really difficult, is to get this pin out. You also have to unsplit your split pin. So you have to get a very small tool. My tools are there, I'll grab them. A very small tool to straighten that little pin out, get it out to push this out. Otherwise, you have to cut through your furler to cut your forestay to do all that. And some of them can be quite massive, and to even get this through could be a chore. So when you do have and I'm a Milwaukee fan, but I'm not advertising Milwaukee guys. When you do have a dismasting, those are the things you think about. What's the other thing people have seen on boats to cut rigging? Excellent. I love one, but I can cut wire with this thing. And I can cut wire with this thing. But how hard is it? It's very hard. And if you have eight of them cut off and you have someone down here screaming because they're underneath the mast, or you don't have a partner with you because they got injured because of the dismasting, or they've been thrown across the cabin, doing all this stuff on your own with one hacksaw is impossible. I've seen so many folks, this is the only thing they had to cut their rigging off. But again, they were bases, so they weren't.
We want to, the behaviour, yeah. And I asked her about which tool she used to cut it right away. Mentioned the hacksaw was the best tool because and they were because they had the carbon fibre and it wasn't, and it was all composite rigging.
That's right.
So composite rigging carbon mask.
Composite is really easy.
You won't be using grinder.
Actually, using the composite is pretty easy as well, but I don't know.
Oh,
Did you?
I think she did, but she's just found it easier with a hacksaw or safer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're doing this number, you don't want to put your leg, or something else. So it's what's going to be the safest thing for you and your boat when you're out at sea in rough weather and your mast just fell down and all of those things to consider and what's going to be the safest thing for you. The other thing Lisa Blair did say was getting the pins out was her only issue at that point because it was so rough that she was not going to be able to do any of this kind of stuff. So the only option she had was to go with a hammer and just hack up those pins until they fell apart, fell away. And that's, yeah.
Little version of that grinder, it's a handheld, it's a trigger pistol, and it comes with a rechargeable battery, it's a 4-inch wheel, and it comes through like
I wish it did,
and it's very light.
but I find that it doesn't quite. I find the wheel is gone within one cutting. So for me, it's not terribly useful. I do it cutting freaking. And then your recovery. So once you have cut it away, there's something on the bottom. Again, my notes, I didn't print it out to write them down, but recovery. So recover as much of your rigging as possible because you may be able to use it to jimmy rig something or make something that can function as an mast to get you to someplace where you will be more safe. So the one thing I wanted to talk about is, I think it's the next picture, is a type of jig pole. So if you do have enough of your mast and you can make it safe to put it back on, how do you get it up? So that's the other question, because if you've ever tried to lift a rig that is like a trailable without a gin pole, it's virtually impossible. You need the angles of a gin pole, which would be this. So if this is your makeshift mast, you would put a pole here, connect it to the top of whatever part of the mast you have left, rig it down to the bow, and then hopefully back to the cockpit on the winch, because you'll need a winch to pull it up. But what it does is that action of this brings your mast up. And that's actually one of the things Prepare did. And there was another, I think it was Lisa Blair did the same thing where they had to re-rig wherever they had left their mast to get a sail on it. This is how they did it. So they had to do a lot of manufacturing, using blocks that they had here and there and everywhere to put on the gin pool and a block here, and then you bring it back, and then they were able to lift their own rig on their own and then tie it down to get it into a position where they could put a sail on it and then carry on. And they both did. So the Pipit got here, which was fantastic. Some of my friends got to see her come through the heads with her big yellow, orange sail. And then Lisa Blair did the same thing. She got herself to I think it was South Africa, wasn't it? And got her extended on her way again. So anyhow, the other consideration here is insurance. If you do dismast, be conscious of how much you save, because if the insurance can find a reason to pay out, they will. And I've experienced that with 5 rigs this year. The insurers, if there was anything for them to go, oh, there was corrosion on that, and it says in my policy, if it's corrosion, I'm not paying. They will do it. And in each case, they have to sue the insurance company to get So just be kind of aware of the considerations as well. Always say first, but once you get where you need to go, you might, this was Medallia when she came in and, gosh, the Airbnb was fantastic. She was lovely. How many people got there later? I did. She was awesome, isn't she? She had a fantastic journey getting back here and along without the ocean virus.
But she's back here at the moment, so.
That's right.
She's
She's
taking a
away.
lot of-
She's
She's
taken her
struggling.
boat apart. It's becoming IKEA sets, isn't it?
We let her know we were here to help if she needed anything, but she hasn't. Wanted to help her. So the next thing we were going to talk about, and it's more demonstration than anything, is what can I do in parts of my rigging boat? So if you want to come up here, let's look at what we can use. Like I said, stay-on fittings kind of eyes, toggles, and studs. The studs are less useful by raw. I'm gonna let y'all fiddle with them and use them. So the stay-on fitting. Multiple parts here on the inside. And I don't know if you can see it. There's a cone, and the cone matches the cone. Right? Then you have your steel fitting and your bottom fitting. So the bottom fitting could be your funnel, it could be your eye, and if you just say it could be your eye, which you can turn into a toggle if you have a spare toggle in there. And so let's just some of this away a little bit. See. I'm gonna go with the small. Because I have this small. So what you do is you place this on first, on the wire, like this. You uncoil your outer layer. So 7x19 wire has an outer layer of wire and an inner core of wire. So you undo all these little pieces. And when you're doing this, you're likely to cut your fingers because wire sharp.
Be hard to pick lots while you're doing it, because you can't just the wire.
You will that, and you can't feel it once you get things on. That's the other thing. So people are like, oh, why don't you wear gloves when you're at work? Your hands are, I get cut off, but I'm always dirty. It doesn't ever go away. Because I can't feel what you can't feel what you're doing if you're really close. This could take a few minutes. So you've got your outer wires, and you can see here. Can you see the core? So you want, if it's going to go like this, that's your cone, and that's your cone. You want that to be on the bottom, right? So it's going to match up with the cone. So we're going to put this right on the core. What you want to do is you want to have about 3 or 4 mils hanging out the bottom there. See that? And then you rewrap the wire. So whichever way the wire is going, if you just do that, it'll wrap back. Nice and tidy. Just do that. It's almost like that bend in that. The only consideration here is that's going to want to try and pull back out. So you just keep pushing it back to make sure you have those 2 to 3 mil hanging out there. And when you wrap these back around all the way, there's a little cut in that wedge. And you don't want the wire to sit in there. You want it to be around it. So you just keep pushing that around, and you can see 2 wires have tried to pop into that little thing. I'm just going to push them around. And then you just push that up. And you're going to see there's still a couple little mil hanging out the bottom of the center. And what I usually do is I put a bunch of Loctite on here. You don't want the threads to come apart once you have it on. You don't do it at this point, but you you do it afterwards.
Blue or red?
And so, I need my tools now. So you do it up and you keep doing it up until you can't do it up anymore. Usually you'll have 2 threads at the top left. And then once you do that, you want to undo it again. And what you're going to want to see is all of the cones themselves in and match the cone on the inside of this. If that hasn't happened, you got to start.
If you, so you'd be doing this on a day 2 or something that's kind of snapped off.
Yeah.
Could you during weeks and time, just until you get it?
Absolutely.
Together, right?
So that's the next thing I was going to show
Yeah.
is what you could possibly do while you're repairing this. So your first thing is if say you got your rig up there and your D2 is snapped, you want to firstly get off that tack and put it on the leeward side, and then you drop all your sails. That's the first thing you're going to do, right? And then you're going to try and figure out a way to tighten that up with a bit of rope. So again, knowing your knots and how to tie stuff off is really important. So you would do some rope from the end of your spreader up to your top of your rigging. And the only problem with that is what is your rigging? That was the other thing we were going to talk about is what's on the hook. And a lot of boats have a lot of different fittings. So if you have fittings like these on the top of your stay, and you're going to have a thing like this on the mast, so like that. Has anybody seen that on their mast? So what you're going to need to do is put your rope through that, through the other side, and tie it off, and then bring your rope down to the spreader. And the same thing if it's at the top, if it's your catch rod that's done it, same thing. Put it through, tie it off so it can't pull out. And then bring it down to the spreader, down to your bottom. The thing is there's going to be a lot of critical thinking that needs to happen for this because it's not as simple as that. Somebody's going to have to get this on first. How am I going to tie it off to each of the spreaders because it doesn't just sit there. And how am I going to tension it? So if you have a piece of rope that's going from the top of your mast down to your spreader, down to your bottom spreader, and then down to the side of this, how am I going to tension it? Because if you tie it onto this, and then you try to tension it like this, you're twisting everything. So you got to think about what kind of lock do you think you need to do a bit of tensioning on that. Trucker stitch. There's another name for trucker stitch, is sheet pitch.
They are different, but trucker stitch there's a right way as well. There's a way that you lock off knots so it doesn't tighten up. So yeah, it's pretty. It's like a halyard as well, right?
Yeah.
So
I think at the end of the Prezzo is the knots. That one. It's not very clear on there, sorry. So, here's how to tie a trucker stitch. Do you want to show us? I'll help.
So you could use your spinning halyard if you've got to, you could essentially just go up and run it through and kind of snake it around a little bit. Something like that, couldn't you?
Yeah. So let's say, what can we do? It's hard with this stuff, isn't it? Here and there. So basically, what we're trying to do is potential.
So it comes to like.
Yeah, that's right. So if you don't know how to do this, this is a very important knot. And it would be good to, I think, a knot was on the list of recommended things to have as well. Very good. So essentially what you're trying to do there is that we're trying to put this down here. And we can do that by just pulling down on the roof. And one of the recommended things to have is a roll of rope. My suggestion is to have something really sturdy, with a core that's Dyneema SA78 minimum. Otherwise, when you put tension on something, if you're using something stretchy like double, all you're going to do is get more stretch, and more stretch, and more stretch. And you're going to have to be tensioning up over and over again. So using something with low stretch properties is really important. Here, thanks.
You look at that bit of a loop, so it's self-tension.
I do. Okay. So again, those are some of the things you'll need to have available to you on boat is how to tie those things. And tie those knots. Other things that'll get you in a lot of trouble with running rigging is soft shackles. Dylan needs to learn how to make. But you can get them at the shops, so very easy to come on. Or you can ask me. The other thing is loops. They're often very useful on a boat to give yourself a little length. So if you do have a thing where you are doing your rigging, you need a little bit of extra, where you don't have enough length on something, you can use your loops to give you length and strength. Even just plain Dyneema loop will be sufficient. The other thing is you find that you have to stay log fitting like we showed, and you don't have enough length. You can use what we in the trade called riggers mistakes. So when a piece of rigging isn't made long enough and we've had to repair it with something like this, it goes right on there and it'll keep the length to go to whatever your next hole is. Okay. Do those kind of repairs make sense? Who wants to try and do a stay lock?